Well, aloha and good afternoon to all of you tuning in here to the platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. I'm Brian Kalesuji, joined by Yunji Denise, and we are here with a special report now as we prepare for Hurricane Douglas as it makes its way to the state of Hawaii. We are, of course, getting ready for a storm here, Yunji, and this is a way to engage the viewers and the subscribers to the Honolulu Star-Advertisers by really connecting our viewers with some of the experts.
Yeah, we know that you watch a lot of forecasts. A lot of you have been engaged. The governor just held a very long news conference both on COVID and the hurricane. The difference, of course, with this medium and what we so enjoy about it is that you can directly ask your questions in the comments. We are so fortunate this afternoon to be joined by Robert Ballard from the National Weather Service. He's the Science and Operations Officer over at NWS and the Central Pacific Hurricane Center. We're so blessed to have you with us. We have that latest track, so tell us, what are we looking at? What is the very latest?
Well, we keep hoping that we'll see a little nudge to the north with Hurricane Douglas as it approaches the islands, but so far not too much luck there. It still continues on a track which is going to take it very, very close to the islands, starting late tonight and then continuing through about early Monday as it moves its way up the chain. The big question right now, which is on everybody's minds, is it actually going to move across the islands, or will it stay just to the north and maybe spare us some of the worst weather? But right now, it's not looking so great. We've got a fair amount of computer guidance that says that as Douglas gets closer, it may make a turn a little bit more toward the west that could take it across some of the islands. So we're keeping a really close eye on that.
Let's take a look at that map, Ryan. If you could throw up that, yeah, so we're now looking, this is, of course, the cone there, and you're looking at the time sort of hour by hour impacts there. What are we expecting when it comes to which island at this point do we expect to see the heaviest impact?
Yeah, so at this point in the game, we like to try to guide people toward when they need to be hunkered down. For the Big Island, that's going to be late tonight. The conditions are going to start going downhill probably late this evening or after midnight, and then the conditions will just continue to worsen into Sunday. For Maui County, that's looking more like Sunday morning, that you want to have everything done. If you're going to do any preparations tonight, that's fine, but then by Sunday morning, things are going to be going downhill pretty quickly. And then for Oahu, you have a fair amount of Sunday to still get ready, maybe through midday or so. And then during the afternoon into the evening, the weather's going to go downhill as the storm approaches. And then finally for Kauai, we're looking at late Sunday evening, or actually Sunday evening, later Sunday into Sunday evening, for when the worst conditions should start to begin to impact the Garden Isle. And in any one spot, you know, we're expecting maybe about 12 hours or so of pretty inclement stormy weather as the hurricane or tropical storm makes its point of closest approach. We do think that Douglas is going to continue to really slowly weaken. We wish it was weakening a little faster, but it's taking its time weakening as it gets here. So whether it arrives as a high-end tropical storm or a low-end hurricane, we still think it's going to bring some pretty decent impacts, pretty significant impacts to at least portions of the main Hawaiian Islands as it moves through.
And we're taking a look out here at some of the tropical storm force wind speed and the probabilities. As we can see, it sort of definitely decreases over time. We see going from those purples to those shades of green. But if you can sort of talk us through this right now, because even as it sort of weakens, it is still posing some strong winds that could be trouble for all of the islands, really.
Yeah, I don't want to give anybody a false sense of security about this. We don't often have winds in that kind of range. So when you're talking about strong tropical storm, you're looking at winds of say 45, 55, 65 miles an hour, and the gusts, of course, will be even higher than that. We know that the mountains around the main Hawaiian Islands do really strange things to the wind. They can drastically accelerate winds in some areas, and in some areas they might slow down the wind a little bit. Those areas where the winds speed up will change with time because winds around a tropical cyclone rotate. So as Douglas approaches, our winds right now are pretty gusty trades, but they're going to turn to the north as that low pressure area begins to get close to the islands. And then what we'll see is the winds will start to shift around as the center goes near or maybe just north of each island. You're going to see the winds change direction rather drastically. And so it's going to make for some pretty interesting wind effects, and it's going to get pretty strong and gusty and damaging in some areas, we think.
Are you expecting this to be more of a wind event, a rain event, storm surge? What are we expecting out of this system?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you bring up what we like to call the triple threat. So a hurricane is not only just a wind event. You can get the wind, obviously, but then you also can get heavy flash flooding rain, and you can also get extremely high surf and storm surge on top of that. So we want to consider all of those things in regards to each area. When you're thinking about the wind is probably going to be with Douglas. It's probably about equal threat for high winds and also pretty intense flooding as the center goes through. We could see 5 to 10 inches of rain or more in a really short time. Douglas is moving fairly quickly, so we're not looking for the type of rainfall that we saw with Hurricane Lane a couple of years ago, where the tail end of the cyclone kind of got hung up over the Big Island and we got 40 or 50 inches of rain. It's not going to be that kind of system. This is more of a fast mover, so we could see 5 to 10 inches of rain, but in a fairly short amount of time. So that could cause flash flooding in some areas. I still think, though, that if the hurricane or tropical storm manages to make its way across the islands, we're going to see winds that we haven't seen in a really long time. Except for maybe Kauai. Kauai, of course, had Iniki in 1992. We won't see winds that strong, but we could see winds that would be powerful enough to be pretty destructive. Again, it wouldn't surprise me to see gusts of 80, 90, maybe even 100 miles per hour in some areas near the mountains.
You know, we've often heard in past that we've had these conversations that when all these storms come, we've always heard about the wind shear and how that has always been a shield for the state. How is the wind shear maybe taking an effect in this category with this hurricane? And is that sort of something that could potentially help save the state yet again?
Yeah, typically we have a strong upper level jet stream, which is blowing really strong high level winds at, up at airliner level over the state. And so those winds are there a lot of the summer. And we know from the past that hurricanes approaching the islands can meet that wind shear and just get ripped apart. The thunderstorms and the heavy rain just gets ripped off, and then it just leaves a low-level center that comes through, and it's not nearly as bad. In this case, though, our fear is that the wind shear, which has been over us for quite a while now, has backed off. The wind shear is still there, but it's west of the islands, so that's too late to induce a lot of weakening on Douglas as it approaches. So kind of what we're relying on in this instance is that Douglas is moving over slightly cooler water. Hurricanes like water of 80 degrees Fahrenheit or greater to maintain their strength or intensify. So when they start moving over water that's 79, 78, 77 degrees, it can progressively and slowly weaken the system as it approaches. So that's what's going on right now. The weakening that we're seeing is mostly due to the cooler water. We think that Douglas may encounter some shear by the time it gets here, but it is probably too late to really do a number on the storm and rip it apart like we've seen in a lot of past systems. Like Lane was a great example of a hurricane that was coming right at us, and we knew it was going to get sheared. And at the last minute, not too far south of Oahu, maybe 50 miles or so, it got ripped apart, and we were really, really lucky. In this case, we don't know if we're going to be so lucky. It's not looking so great.
Okay, let's take some questions here. Diana Tavega says, so it sounds like the west sides of the islands may get substantial impact because of the wind system, despite the fact that the hurricane is coming from the east. Are there parts of each island that should be more concerned than others? I know that things can obviously change.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we do have folks that sometimes think that. They think, well, the hurricane is coming at us from the windward side, so if I'm on the leeward side, then I should be okay. Well, that's not entirely true, and you make a good point about that terrain. the winds as they come toward the mountains, if you're in Kailua or Kaneohe, you know that often the trades aren't quite as strong there as when you come over to the town side. When the winds approach mountains, they slow down. And so you get a little bit of a wind sheltering, a slight wind sheltering. And then when the wind gets up and over the mountain, it accelerates as it blows downhill on the other side. Now, in a hurricane or a tropical storm, when it gets close, those wind directions change. So it may initially go from north or northeast, and then the wind directions are going to shift around. So that's what I was talking about before, is that where those winds accelerate and become damaging may change or will change with time as the cyclone passes by. We know also from the past that when we get southwesterly Kona winds, that the normal windward sides of the islands, like Kailua, Kaneohe, the east sides, can get really strong and damaging winds on that side. So after the center of Douglas goes by, if we start to see those southwesterly winds, the areas on the windward side, which may initially not see a lot of wind, may get stronger winds as the storm starts to depart.
You know, we're seeing right now the track, of course, moving a little north of Hawaii Island and the Big Island. What can they expect for those residents on the island? Because it doesn't look like they will get as significant of an impact and hit as maybe the others. What were those residents who are tuning in right now watching from Hawaii Island? What can they expect?
Yeah, it's not looking as bad for Hawaii Island. So the track looks like it might go just a little bit farther north, enough to spare the Big Island the worst of the weather. I think we're still calling for the possibility of 2 to 5 inches of rain, and that's more localized rather than a widespread rainfall. It could still fall in really intense bursts, and you could still see some pretty strong wind gusts on the Big Island as Douglas approaches and after it goes by. But we're not looking for winds that are going to be quite that strong. I would think, maybe more like on the order of 25, 35, 45 miles an hour. Of course, if you've been in the Hilo area, you know that it doesn't take a lot of wind in Hilo to start causing problems. So that's why we are maintaining the headlines that are in effect. I think we have a tropical storm warning and hurricane watch for the Big Island. And we're going to evaluate that with each advisory and decide whether or not that needs to come up or remain up or come down. And then we also have flash flood watches that are in effect for all of the islands as well. And that includes the Big Island. So something to pay attention to there.
I want to just do a quick follow-up on that if I can, Yanji. Because a lot of people talk about the Big Island and there's sort of this Hawaiian, talk about how the mountains protect us, right? We hear it all the time in these storms that Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa will help to protect the state and Hawaii Island because it breaks it up. Now that it moves, can you maybe speak to that? I mean, right now we know the storm is maybe not going in that direction.
Yeah.
But how truthful are those comments that we hear every hurricane cycle?
Yeah. So over the last few years, we've been able to see how hurricanes and tropical storms interact with the Big Island. For example, Iselle. There were a lot of folks that insisted to us before Iselle that there's no way a hurricane or a tropical storm can make landfall on the Big Island. And we suspected that probably was not true. And sure enough, in 2014, Hurricane Iselle came right at the Big Island, and it came ashore in Lower Puna and down in Ka'u. No problems at all. There was tremendous damage down there. Some places had no power, I think, for almost a month. So the Big Island will, if the core of a tropical storm or hurricane goes right over the island, like Iselle, then that can, destroy the circulation pretty well. Once Iselle came out the other side of the Big Island, there wasn't much left of it. But the Big Island, compared to the size of a hurricane, as you can maybe see behind me, is not. It's pretty small, and so it's a relatively small target. If the core of the circulation, if the center of the circulation doesn't get hung up on the terrain, then it's really not going to do much to slow things down. So maybe a hurricane coming directly at Oahu from the southeast, yes, if it hits the Big Island first, it's not going to come out the other side nearly as intense as it would if it sneaks through. If it goes a little farther north and and maybe hits Maui first, then Oahu could be directly hit. And we know, of course, anything coming from the south, and we're wide open, the same as Kauai. So I like to think there's a protective effect there, but it's like wearing a bulletproof vest, which is too small. And the other thing is, of course, the Big Island people, those folks, that leaves them open on the southeast side. And they're vulnerable to hurricanes, just like all the islands. And that includes the Kona side. I know some folks think that the Kona side, is protected in a way. But if you were to have a hurricane that were to loop around, and Douglas isn't going to do this, but if it were to go south of the islands and then recurve, the Kona side or Maui, southwest side of Maui, could get, really devastated from a hurricane coming from that direction, almost like Eva did, except a little closer to us.
Let's talk a little bit about timing. I see a lot of people asking about their specific county. Now it's a beautiful out here. I'm looking out the window on Oahu, beautiful, in downtown Honolulu. Still some time to do some preps. How long do we have before we will start to feel these impacts? And given the little time that we do have between now and then, what is your number one, the 1, 2, 3 things that you would suggest people do between now and then?
Yeah, that's a good idea. And I'll go over that timing again, because I really, like you said, I want folks to understand this is the time that they have. Now, bearing in mind that perhaps the Big Island might escape the worst of this, we still want folks to get ready just in case. So on the Big Island, the conditions, the stronger winds, heavier rain would be expected to arrive sometime after late tonight. So midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. After that, things could start to get worse pretty quickly. For Maui County, we're looking at like Sunday morning, so around 8 o'clock in the morning. If you're not really done with your preparations by then, it's going to be too late, and the worst of the weather is going to start to roll in after that. And then for Oahu, we're looking at about 2 p.m. So you have maybe tonight and then tomorrow morning to finish things up. But conditions could start to go downhill with winds and rain at 2 p.m. on Sunday. And I also want to point out, too, I should mention that this does not include the surf, which is going to come up out ahead of the storm. That will arrive first. In fact, we should already be starting to see that for like Maui and the Big Island. And then that's going to spread its way up the chain pretty quickly. As far as winds and rain, though, go again. Sunday night, about 8 o'clock or after for Kauai is when things get worse there, and into the overnight hours it'll get pretty bad on Kauai. Does that help with the timing?
Definitely. And so, if you had given those times, what would you suggest people do between now and then?
Right now, if I were you, you definitely want to do a general cleanup around your yard or your lanai. For example, my wife and I, we're going to clear everything off our lanai tonight. We're bringing all the furniture in, even the heavier furniture. We're going to bring it in. We're just going to make sure that everything is good to go out there, so that nothing gets picked up or becomes a projectile or debris. In case the winds get really strong, we want to make sure that that's ready to go. If you've got lights strung up or something, you may want to take those down. Any toys or lawn furniture, pool furniture type stuff, I would try to bring all that in or secure it if you can. Another thing that you want to think about right now is, do you have supplies? So hopefully by now everyone has gotten their hurricane kit together, and you have as many days as you can of food and water. Now we're suggesting 14 days, and that's in case the port were to be damaged. Shipments to Hawaii could be delayed. But if you can't do that many days, then get what you can. And also think about things like, do you have batteries? Even if we don't get really strong damage, we may be without power for a while. So if you've got batteries, if you've got solar lights, we've got solar lights at our house. We've had them out for the last couple of days charging, making sure that they're getting plenty of charge. Batteries for radios. Know how you're going to get news and information. If you have a NOAA weather radio, a battery-powered NOAA weather radio, you can keep up with our bulletins even if you lose the internet. Old school hurricane tracking chart where you can keep an eye on where the system is and when it's gone by. A lot of folks don't think about that when you start losing electricity and internet, you're going to lose communication, but you can still keep in touch. Our weather radio transmitter has batteries, so we should remain broadcasting. We have a generator here at the office so that we can keep doing our job for as long as we can after the storm gets here, and to keep keep folks informed and keep them safe. Trying to think of what else I'd do. If you were near the shore, you probably need to be keeping an eye on the water and think about on the east sides whether or not you need to move inland later tomorrow or tomorrow night for Oahu as it gets closer, and maybe sooner than that for some areas down by Maui and the Big Island. That's a common thing that people forget about, is that the ocean ahead of a storm is going to want to come inland, and so that's something that folks maybe haven't seen water rise that high before, and we'll really have to keep an eye on that as Douglas gets close. Don't wait until it's too late if you need to move away from the shoreline.
We know that your time is limited and we have to run, but I want to just get a quick update if we can before you run. We are expecting another report that will be coming out soon, another update, if you will. Is there any indication on what we can expect in this next update? Anything that you've heard or you've seen and that might be able to kind of give us a hint of what we may be expected to see in this next update?
Yeah, I mean, the hurricane specialists are hard at work. We're tracking the Air Force reconnaissance data. The Air Force folks just went back to Honolulu here just a little while ago after giving us 4 great center positions, and then also lots of great data on the size and the wind radii. We really want to thank those Air Force Reserve folks for coming out here during the pandemic and getting us such critical data. Without knowing how large that system is, that's really data that we would struggle with just using satellites. So having the Air Force Reserve folks out here is fantastic. I don't think that, from what I've seen, that we're going to have any huge surprises that are coming up at 5 o'clock. We do want folks to understand that we'll be doing bulletins every 6 hours, like we always do, 5 and 11. And then also there will be intermediate advisories that will refresh the position and give you new storm position, and then also new intensity if something changes. And as the cyclone gets even closer to the islands, if it gets within radar range, which we think it will, we will probably start doing hourly updates where we are tracking the center and telling folks where it's going and giving you wind reports and things like that. So as the cyclone gets closer and closer, we'll have more information coming out more often as we get closer. But, we understand that you got to prepare, get the update, get the information you need, and then go back and get ready. I've heard some folks say that they think, this may be not coming or whatever, but just understand that, it only takes one. We hope that maybe this will go a little farther north and miss us, but it's really not looking good right now. And in fact, there's a fair number of computer models that are saying just the opposite, that it's going to go only so far north and then start to make a turn toward like Maui, Molokai, and Oahu, and then Kauai. So with that in mind, our eyes are wide open, and we're really paying attention to this, and we hope you will too.
Okay, thank you so much, Bob Ballard with the National Weather Service. We really appreciate your time. We're going to see you back here in 24 hours, and at that time is when actually we are expecting the effects to be hitting us here on Oahu, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that would be about the time that we should start to see things beginning to ramp up. We won't be in the worst of it, but it could be about the time that we start seeing the winds pick up and the rain increase.
Okay, well, we appreciate your time. We look forward to seeing you right back here in 24 hours between now and then. We hope you get some rest, and we appreciate all the hard work that you and your team are doing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for helping us get the word out too. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, so you heard him there. It's time to take this seriously. For those folks on Oahu, you do have about 24 hours. Just before our live stream here, the governor and the mayor did have a press conference along with Haima, and they did say, Honolulu Mayor Kirk Caldwell said more than a dozen Shelters will be beginning operations tomorrow. That's Sunday morning at 9 o'clock. There's a full list of all of those shelters on the website of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. The reporters there are working very hard to curate all this information. So please head there. Know where your nearest shelter is. If you live in an area where you typically tend to evacuate, you should know where you can go. Obviously, things have changed a little bit because of COVID. One of the things that will be different is that they are opening the Honolulu Convention Center. So that will be a shelter of last resort as well. They can fit up to 1,600 people in that space with physical distancing. They don't expect to have to do that. Remember, as always, bring your medication, any cash or anything that you need, your emergency papers, and unlike before, bring a mask. They are requiring that you wear a mask unless you are eating, drinking, or perhaps sleeping, but they really want to have everyone wear a mask as much as possible because, Ryan, we're dealing with the double threat of a weather event and COVID.
Yeah, certainly our elected officials as well as the emergency management officials putting in a lot of hours right now during this time. And we heard from Bob Ballard about just some of the practical things that you can begin doing right now, moving things inside, anything that could be used as maybe a projectile in the air, anything from even lights and lawn furniture, anything he's saying to really start making plans right now, bringing that inside, as well as making sure that you have those supplies ready. I think a lot of people take for granted now the technology that we have, the ability that we have to go online, to get updates, to charge our phones, things like that. Of course, in a storm, all of that can change very quickly if the power grid is affected. And so just some practical tips that he was able to provide. We are seeing a lot of people asking about the sirens that will be potentially going off on the islands and when they can expect that. Of course, Bob Ballard does not necessarily work with the Civil Defense or HIEMA or those things, so we weren't able to ask him that specific questions. Of course, that would be something that would be handled county by county on some of those local management levels of the defense. So we're not sure that Bob Ballard be someone that could able to explain that. But we have seen in the past that those sirens have gone off as a warning signal. But really do not wait till the sirens go off to decide to take this seriously. Now is the time, especially for those here on the island of Oahu who have about, as we said, 24 hours to really get things in order to prepare for the storm. Of course, Maui will likely be the first one to feel some of these effects, and we will continue to monitor this throughout the next 24 hours.
Yeah, and Mayor Kirk Caldwell did address that siren question, and as Ryan noted, he did say in his presser that he had just before this one that is a county by county decision, and it is something that they will consider. But again, as Ryan said, don't wait for the siren. Make sure that you're aware of the conditions around you, and that you know what your neighborhood typically experiences. If you typically tend to evacuate to another family member's house, be cognizant of COVID. Maybe this is a time to know where the shelters are. Maybe that is a safer place given the pandemic. So you have a little bit of time right now to be aware of all of that and figure out where you need to go. And again, also with water, Bob Ballard talked about potentially having a 14-day supply. This doesn't necessarily mean you need to run out to Costco right away. You can just fill all the water jugs in your house, fill your bathtub. There are, workarounds so that you don't necessarily have to run out and flood the stores, but just make sure that you are taking some precautions and some steps now. And a good reminder, as you said, Ryan, charge your phone, charge your computer, make sure your devices are ready to go.
Yeah, and we certainly, of course, we will try to bring you information as it becomes available, and we encourage you to stay connected here to the platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. We also would encourage all of you to let us know what you're experiencing in your neighborhoods as this rolls through. You're sort of our eyes and ears out there in the community, all the way from the Big Island to Kauai. So make sure that you let us know what you're experiencing in your neighborhoods as we sort of go through this storm together. Again, we will be with Bob Ballard right back here tomorrow afternoon to get an update on what things have happened within this time.
Yeah, so until then, please stay safe, do the preparations that you're able to, prioritize what you can, stay safe, and of course, socially distance, wear a mask. All the COVID things are still very important to remember as we prepare for this storm system.
We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Aloha.